You might have noticed that I haven't said much yet that you don't already know. It's common knowledge. Most of what I've said are actually common knowledge. Most people know about these things. But that's the nature of existential issues or existential questions, which are different from psychodynamic or structural ones. Existential questions are usually things we know about, but knowing about them, does not mean we have resolved them for ourselves. Doesn't mean we have come to terms with these questions. So what we're doing is that we're dealing with some of the most fundamental existential issues and questions in human lives to come to more terms with them, to more resolution, to arrive at some kind of peace with some of these questions. So as a result, working with these questions or issues will not necessarily increase our knowledge, but it can develop our maturity and our wisdom, which is what we're working on. So it's a confronting important truth about our humanness, about ourselves, from an inquiry, from an open place, from a place being truthful and wanting to truly grapple with it, come to terms with it, come to some kind of understanding, some kind of resolution, some kind of peace, which frequently doesn't mean coming up with an insight or a piece of information about it, but more a sense of maturation, a sense of acceptance, a sense of peace. And the main thing it will do, it will deepen our connection with our true nature. Some of the questions we have been dealing with are not necessarily easy ones. They're not necessarily ones that we will choose to dwell on, as you know. Many of these things we prefer not to think about, and maybe we'll watch a movie about it happening to other people. It's much more dramatic and satisfying. So one of the truths, some of the existential truths that we want to deal with tonight, is the same thing. Everybody knows it. It doesn't take any genius or realization to figure it out, which is the truth that everybody here, completely everybody, will not be around within at most 100 years. Absolutely, nobody here. Everybody will be completely 100% gone, without a trace. And not only that, not everybody here, everybody probably on earth. So imagine every day you're living your life and all these people and all this stuff, all this life full of life and stuff. And really, if you just think about it, in some short time, 100 years, nothing, really, in a certain sense, all of that will all be gone. There'll be completely new people. People you don't know at all. They will take over this earth. None of the people you know will be here. I mean, it is sort of amusing, but if you think about it, it's actually very, very, very profound. And in some sense, it is the most certain truth you have about the future. You cannot be more certain than that. That within a number of years, you as you know yourself will be no more. Will be gone. Won't be alive. You won't be having the life you have. Now we all know that, right? I'm not saying again anything new. You've known it for a long time. But even though we know it, really most of the time we know it theoretically. We don't really know it. Meaning, we don't know it with the certainty and the fullness that will affect our actions every day, our life every day. We know it as a theoretical possibility, not as a heartfelt, not in the depths of the soul. I mean, the truth of our eventual exit is so obvious, so constant, so ever present. It is truth that is with us all the time, every instant of our lives. In reality, our death is with us every instant of our life. But most of the time, we're not aware of it. We're not completely believing it, not truly, fully taking it into consideration. And much of the time we live and think and plan and stuff as if we're going to be around forever. Or not forever, we think we're going to be around for some time. So there are two things here. First of all, we're not going to be around forever. You will not be around forever. Nobody will. You will at some point cease to exist as you know yourself. And that end, although might be some years, but not necessarily, might be next week, might be tomorrow. You never know. What is certain is that it's going to happen. When? We don't know. And for some reason, the fact that we don't know when contributes to the existential situation where we know we're going to go, but somehow not fully acknowledging the fact. Not completely coming to terms with it as yes, true, that's it, nothing. And completely emotionally feeling it, recognizing it, and acknowledging it in the depth of our heart and soul. Most of the time, we acknowledge it mentally. We know it as a fact. Just like we know as a fact that stars die, that there are neutrons. We know it as a fact, but that's not the same thing as truly knowing it. So it is an existential situation in the sense it is a fact, we all know, but it is of the nature of this existential situation that for some reason we're always skirting that fact. We're always deflecting it. We're always somehow denying it. We don't deny it in our mind. We deny it in our feelings. We deny it in our actions. We deny it in the way we live. We deny it in our decisions. Or if we don't deny it, we don't acknowledge it completely and fully. It's like, it's a fact, long time from now, and it feels as if long time might be really, really long. As I've got all the time in the world to waste. Do whatever I want to do with it, regardless how important it is what I'm doing, how significant. The fact that everybody you know is going to die. And you too will die, physically. There'll come a time when you'll stop eating, speaking, breathing, all of that. You will not be in this life. You won't do with the kind of thing you do what you want to do. You won't be with the people you're being with. You will not experience things the way you're experiencing them now. I'm not saying there will not be experience, but definitely won't be this experience. Not the experience of this world, this life. Not the life that we call life. So, do we really know that fact? Know it as a fact, as a truth that we live with all the time, a truth that informs our life just like all other truths about our life? And does the uncertainty about when it is going to happen also inform our life? What is it anyway? What happens? Do we know what it is? Do you know what it means to die? What is its significance? What is death? What is the experience? Have we contemplated thought of what it implies, what it means, what it could possibly feel like? Most of the time, we believe, we acknowledge the truth, and we know what it is, and most of the time, we're basically taking the common point of view or the scientific medical point of view about death, and we believe that's it. But that is really a very distant, schizoid, theoretical way of knowing something. Something that is not just a scientific fact, but it is really very, very, very personal truth about you. Very personal. It can't be more personal than that. It's really about you, not about a specimen. Everyone, somebody comes to you one morning and tells you, "Looks like you have a couple of teeth missing." Do you just say, "Well, what's the big deal?" Or do you go right away, go check, go look in the mirror? It's very important to know, right? It's something about you, it's not about somebody else. Now when somebody tells you, one of those say, "You're going to be missing," do you get as interested? But it is that personal, a lot more than a couple of teeth. It's really the whole thing, the whole Michigans will be gone. It is a radical end. And regardless of how long we're going to live, really, that span of life is, when you think about it, objective is not very long, especially if you think of it in terms of human development and evolution. 100 years is very short for most people to really develop and learn to be themselves as fully as they would like to be. Since that is a fact, and it's also a fact, it might not be 100 years, right? It might be 10 years, 20 years, 10 days. Don't know. And since we don't know, it could be any time. What are we doing? Wasting any time. Why do we waste any time? We talked about cherishing the moment. Now we know that the moment, there might not be that many moments left. But the fact that most human beings piss away their time as if they got lots of it. Just like we got tons of time, waste this, waste that, do this little trivial thing, this insignificant thing, it's past this time, at that time, as if we're going to have lots later on, you see. When what you have is actually not a lot, and in fact it might be much less than we think. So it seems, if somebody is really wise and considering this fact, that it's not much, and even not only that, it might not be that long anyway, since I never know. That's a very significant truth to consider in living my life from moment to moment. How will my life look if I really take that into consideration in some kind of a full, mature, comprehensive way? Am I going to live my life the way I do it now? Or if not, how am I going to change it? How will I be myself? It's the most certain thing we have, human beings, and in some sense might be, or the hardest thing to really come to terms with, or maybe one of the hardest things to come to terms with. In some sense, the human mind is incapable of holding that question. Cannot deal with it in its own terms. The only way we can deal with it is by maturing, not by knowing more. By becoming deeper. Might help us to read the research about it, find out all that is known about it, but that's not really what dealing with it means. Dealing with it is really contemplating the question, living with it for a while, meditating on it, and seeing how does it touch me personally. How much do I believe it? How much do I know? How I feel about it? Do I feel all that I feel about it? Do I feel what I feel about it completely, fully? Or is it always waiting? The question is waiting someplace in some kind of shelf. When the time comes, I will think about it. Now, it is true that biologically speaking, statistically speaking, human beings don't need to think of that question when they're very young. Right? And the older they get, the more there is a need to contemplate it. It's sort of a normal, natural thing. And it is fine, it's part of nature that it is that way. What we become aware of it gradually. But here, here, we're learning to be mature. We want to see the truth, any truth, because we love to see and know the truth for its own sake. And death happened to be a truth that is with us all the time, much more attached to us than our shadow. It's not like a truth just in the future. The truth is really all the time. We have discussed the inner deaths, how these happen frequently. If we see reality as it really is, we recognize that that death is actually happening all the time. We just don't see it. Each moment is born and dies instant by instant with everything in it. But the fact of mortality, the fact of physical death, is with us by the mere fact that we know it. We know its possibility. And it is impacting us, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. In fact, the inner death that we discussed, the death of the ego, the death of the self, the various kinds, the various types, different levels. The fear in them, the grief in them, even the feeling on them, won't be there if we didn't know there was physical death. Much of the emotions that arise in those inner deaths is because we associate those inner deaths with physical death. So we know that there is physical death. It is truth that is there. Not in the sense that the physical death is happening now, but a truth that we know as a possibility at any time. It is one of those existential truths. It is difficult and very hard to contemplate, to come to terms with, but it is also one of the most fruitful contemplations, because it is a contemplation that confronts us with reality as it is, with down-to-earth, practical reality, with the actual facts of human life. It's very basic fact. Death is really not farther away than illness, not farther away than accident. It is more frequent than weddings. Right? So what I'm discussing is the fact of mortality, and the other fact that we don't acknowledge it fully. We deal with the fact, not that there is a fact of mortality, nobody's going to argue with that, but we want to explore our acknowledgement of it. Do we truly acknowledge it? Some of us, of course, have come to encounters with death, so they have come to more proximity, more familiarity, more in touchness, more friction with it, more acknowledgement of it. But even that comes in degrees and kinds. But many of us, most of us, even when we come close to death, a few years pass, we forget. And as if we've been given another infinite time. See, oh, well, it didn't die. Well, good. Now I'm going to go on, it's going to be another 5,000 years. I'll think that one of the main reasons, probably the primary reason, for people not cherishing the moment, for people spending a lot of the time in the secondary and trivial in life. One of the main reasons in wasting much of time is the lack of full acknowledgement of our mortality. If we truly acknowledge it, it will become difficult to waste time. It will be difficult to do the trivial, the insignificant, inconsequential. We will be more interested, more courageous to do what is significant, what's important, what we truly want to do. It becomes easier to recognize who we are and what we want and what kind of life we really want. It will be easier to get through the fog and all this mental confusion and conflicts about what is going on or what needs to happen. We'll become clear and more single-minded. So in some sense, the lack of an acknowledgement of death makes us not live life fully. And the fear of acknowledging death is the same thing as the fear of living life fully. We find this at each instant, every time we discuss this. See, the embracing of death, embracing of life somehow go together. The fear of death and the fear of life go together.